Hey guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome to those who are new. And today we're going to talk about what it's like to use Nikon Z9 for a wedding event or very large, just in general event. And I'm going to put a bunch of pictures and slides that you guys can get a real understanding of image quality and resolution and what you're getting out of it. Now, I cover many topics on Nikon Z9, from photo and video to ergonomics to unboxing with this camera. I've owned this camera for over a year now. I did a 6 months review, I did a 1 year review, just really talking about what I like about this camera, maybe what I don't like, what I learned, some of the mistakes that I had made, and I want to be able to help you to really get most potential out of this camera. Now, this is not my first wedding, obviously. This is one of the weddings with Nikon Z9, but I really want to be able to demonstrate and share some of my experience and what it felt like using this camera. And if some of you are owners of Nikon Z8, for the most part, everything I'm going to cover in this video applies to Nikon Z8 as well. There are a few differences. Obviously, the ergonomics and the battery life is going to be different, but for the most part, everything and all the functionality within the camera and all the settings can be applied to Nikon Z8. So if you are a Nikon Z8 owner, you might want to stick around and learn something new from this, or maybe put something in the comments below that I personally don't know, and out of the rest of the YouTube community does not know yet, but you have learned something, discovered, and if you're willing to share, please put it in the comments below. For those who are familiar with Nikon Z9, so you guys don't have to sit through the entire video, I'm gonna put chapters in the description box below so that you can quickly get to the section that you might want to watch, you might want to listen. Other than that, please grab a cup of coffee and let's chime in. So one of the first things that I want to talk about here is, it is a bigger body. And when it comes to handling this camera and ergonomics, even though it is a bigger camera, it is definitely larger in your hand, but because the way ergonomics is made and the way your camera fully wraps around the camera body, it actually makes it easier to hold it, because at the bottom right over here, camera is really resting on your hand, and therefore it makes it easier to hold even with larger lenses. Now, the vertical grip, and I spoke about vertical grip at length. Really, it's actually much more comfortable to hold camera in the vertical grip than in the horizontal grip. This is actually much more appealing position for my hand personally. Maybe it's a little bit different for you if you have a smaller hand, but I have an average hand and it feels very comfortably. So from that standpoint, whether you're using Nikon Z8 or Nikon Z9 in this case, even though, and I get it, even though it's a larger camera body, ergonomically it really sits very well in your hand. And just because it has a little bit more weight than a Z8 or Z6 or Z7, it really feels good in hand. So from that standpoint, I don't really take away any points for using this camera for a long day of such a size. So yeah, ergonomically it felt very, very good. Now let's talk about lenses. And lenses is such a big component of image quality, right? You can have a spectacular camera, but you may have a very lousy lens and you have a lot of chromatic aberration, you may have scratches on lenses, you may not get the same image quality. Now, if you combine Nikon Z9, Nikon Z8 with the native Z-mount lenses, and what I used for my wedding recently is, so I use actually 4 lenses. The first one is the one that's actually recording me right now. It's 24-70 2.8. Yes, it is a larger lens. It actually makes it a little bit heavier when it comes to weight. Ergonomics helps, as I mentioned before, but the weight of a camera, especially because when you zoom out, camera is not zooming in and zooming out internally, so it kind of extends a little bit. It does have a little bit of a tilt forward, but because it's such a spectacular lens and coupled with Nikon Z9, it's really a state-of-the-art, and image quality with that lens specifically, I probably shot, I want to say maybe 60% of the wedding with 24-70 2.8, and I actually done a review in the past about more versatile lens for weddings and events, and actually 24-70 2.8 is one of them, and I will link this video in the corner right up here. Now the next lens that I used for Z9 and for my wedding is 50mm f1.8. Now this lens is small, it's tiny, it's kind of this really not a telephoto lens, but it's not a wide angle. People used to refer to this as a nifty 50. It's really not so tiny anymore, but it is very well made, and 50mm f1.8, especially when I am, somewhere not in the Tuva cramped space, spending time with bridesmaids and taking pictures of rings or something else, or people getting ready. The 50mm is very well balanced on the Z9, and I really enjoy this 50mm. I do not use 50mm f1.2. It is much heavier lens, but at the end of the day, image quality and what your camera and lens will deliver is very critical. F1.2 is a spectacular lens, and if you own it and if you're using it, I will not discourage you. I will not ask you to or suggest you to switch to f1.8, but generally for weddings, when you have multiple lenses, and in case of my case where I can switch from one to the other, f1.8 is enough for me. And this is a great lens, and here's a bunch of images from this wedding that I just shot at 50mm f1.8. Now my next lens that I used is the 85mm f1.8. Now generally when you're shooting a wedding, it's enough for you to have two lenses. You can successfully shoot a beautiful wedding with using 35mm lens and the 85mm lens. And I know a lot of photographers who do just that. They only use prime lenses, 35mm and 85mm, and beautiful, spectacular results. However, I have learned as well that sometimes you need this kind of a little bit more wider angle lens. That's the reason I actually end up switching to the 24-70, because if you're in a smaller spaces, like really tight spaces up against the wall, you need something wider. 35 is not going to cut it. So, but for the mid telephoto, 85mm lens is a beautiful lens. Probably one of my favorites when it comes to results. And I know there's a 85 1.2 on the market as well. That is a spectacular lens. It is a little bit pricey, but I would say for the majority of the weddings, when you're shooting, right, you so frequently end up stopping down to f1.8, f2, f2.2, because if it's not only one person we're trying to capture in focus, one person is going to be out of focus most of the time. So unless you're shooting just an individual bride or a groom or just a person in general at f1.2, then it's perfectly fine. However, for general shooting for weddings, 85 1.8 is a beautiful lens. And again, here's a bunch of images from that from this wedding. I can't be happy enough about this lens. I don't even know whether I'll be switching to f1.2 at this point, because I am very satisfied with this lens. And I hope if you haven't purchased it yet, and if you're looking to get into 85mm lens, I would highly suggest that you start with this one as your first 85, and I don't think you'll be disappointed. Okay, now my fourth lens that I used is, and this is this behemoth. Okay, it is larger, it is a heavier lens. It certainly makes a statement when you taking pictures. It's, you're very noticeable at weddings, but it is a tool of choice, and it does make camera heavier. This is really probably my heaviest setup overall, and but it creates beautiful images. It is absolutely stunning images, especially at 200 at 2.8. The level of compression that you get and the bokeh in the background, especially if you're shooting during the day or when you have little lights behind the person walking towards you. I love this lens. For the most part, during my ceremony, when people are kind of walking through and getting to their position next to the bride and groom where everybody stands, during that time, I use this lens. The wedding was outdoors, it's not indoors. I probably would have used different lens. Most likely if I was indoors, I would have used 24-70 2.8 because when people are coming in, you want to have that flexibility, zooming in and zooming out. If you're using a prime lens during the ceremony, when people are walking in and you didn't get the shot and you're trying to step back and you didn't see who was standing behind you because people are trying to get from behind the aisle and whatnot, and you can trip. So having a 24-70 or 70-200, these are basically staple for wedding photography when you need to zoom in, and it's a beautiful, beautiful lens. I gotta tell you, it is heavier, I'm not gonna lie, and I probably wouldn't be able to work the entire wedding with this one lens for multiple reasons, and certainly one of them would be weight. The other one is the focal range, where you need to be closer, but images that this lens does provide are spectacular. And as you can see on the screen right now, there's a ton and ton of beautiful images, super sharp, super sharp. So yeah, highly recommend. It does look like a telephoto lens when looks like you're using for wildlife at weddings. And by the way, speaking of wildlife, there is a plenty of wildlife happens at weddings on a dance floor. So having a 24-70 for that could be helpful, especially when a ton of people dancing and people go wild. As if you've been at weddings and if you shot weddings in the past, you definitely aware of that. And but yeah, it is kind of a staple in wedding photographer camera bag. I don't use it. Probably I must have used it maybe 15% for the entire wedding. Okay, maybe 10% for the wedding. So my most used lenses, so I would say 24-70 was the lens that I used the most, and then the 85 millimeter f1.8 was the second one, and then the third one that I used is the 70-200. So, okay, now let's talk about the elephant in the room, all right, as the autofocus. Now, using this camera, I gotta tell you, I feel like I'm cheating because over and over and over again, like literally, I would say 95% of my images are in focus. And even though I try to be intentional when I shoot, I don't kind of spray and pray that something is going to be in focus. Literally almost every single image is in focus, probably 95%, if not even more. For the wedding that I shot was probably from 3 p.m. till 10 p.m. I shot about 1,400 images. And because of that, as a wedding photographer, I can add more value to my clients and deliver actually more images. It does take a little bit more time to edit them. However, I have a lot bigger selection at this point. I have used two specific autofocus points. One of them was the IAF, and the second one was the large area IAF for people basically in the box. And the reason I use that specific focus method, because whenever you are in the aisle and a bride and groom coming at you, or maybe bridesmaids and groomsmen, the camera sometimes can focus on people on the outside, and I don't want to do that. I really want to focus on people who are specifically coming at me or walking away from me. And because of that setting, that function within the Z9 and Z8 and actually other models of the Z cameras, that's the autofocus that I use for events. Another point I want to talk about here is the image quality. As most of you know, the camera uses a 45 megapixel back side illuminated stack sensor. It's a mouthful. Now, image quality is absolutely spectacular. Okay, I shoot when I shoot weddings, I shoot to both card slots. Okay, the camera takes XQD cards slash CF Express. This is a CF Express card. For slot 1, I usually shoot in RAW. For slot 2, I shoot in JPEGs just as a backup in case. However, since I've been using XQD cards and CF Express, those have not failed me yet. I have heard instances from other photographers, as well as many of you who are watching my channel, that CF Express and XQD cards can fail, especially if it's kind of a cheaper made card itself. But I would say in my case, I never had that problem before. Honestly, most of our cameras these days on the market that come at $2,000 price range and higher, all of them have spectacular image quality. Once you shoot in RAW, you can do pretty much anything in post-production. Now let's talk about battery a little bit, right? So why I love this camera, and a big part of it is because of the battery. I use, for the most part, just one battery for this wedding. And it is a 3300 milliamp battery. It's a wide and thick and chunky. And I was shooting from 3 until about 10, and maybe battery lasted until 9:30 p.m. At that point, I just used my backup camera, which was Z6 II, but again, my camera was on most of the day, right? So from 3 until about 9:30, use one single battery. So battery, spectacular. I love it. I wouldn't want to trade it for anything else. Part of me wishes that I had a second Z9 to shoot, but it does handy sometimes to have a smaller camera such as the Z8 or Z7. So yeah, I love the battery. And as you know, the battery can be charged right through the USB-C port up here. I've done a video when I've done a mistake. If you want to go watch to a few videos when I talk about some of the mistakes that I've made about charging battery in camera, please do so right over here. When it comes to using flashes, when it comes to using basically an artificial light, so I have transitioned from using Nikon speed lights because I'm finding that Nikon speed lights, even they work most of the time. I've had times when the recycle time is not there, and plus you have to use the AA battery. So I have transitioned to basically Godox V1, and this one specifically is for Nikon hot shoe mount, and I love it. The recycle time, I think I must have used like probably maybe 15% of the entire battery for the entire night of the wedding when I was shooting outdoors. And I'm gonna even tell you this. When I was shooting indoors. And I gotta tell you this. When using this speed light, I don't know what is special about the settings on the camera that I actually had to do less editing when it comes to the color of the final images with the speed light and shooting indoors rather than shooting outdoors half of the wedding. I don't know, the images are coming out very, very beautiful. I love the fact that you can simply attach this speed light and it really rotates in every direction, and the power output is beautiful. I love the fact that sometimes I don't want to shoot all the way to the top. I don't want to shoot forward, obviously, but I might want to lean backwards a little bit here, and it's kind of probably leans additional 10-15 degrees. And when I'm shooting this way, light bounces backwards if I have a wall behind me. So this is a great function of this flash. I also use 8200. It's just kind of my side light if I need to, but for the most part for the wedding I was using the V1 Godox, and great flash. So even turning this on right now, it shows that I have the entire battery. I haven't even charged since the wedding, so I can probably shoot another 2, maybe 3 weddings not even charging this this battery. And the flash itself I think is like, I don't know, maybe a couple $100. I'm gonna put it right here for you guys so that you get to see. Very consistent when it comes to lighting and recycling speed. It's beautiful. So in summary, there is no perfect camera out there, but I would say in my book, and I hope it's in yours as well, this is a state-of-the-art camera. It is a powerhouse. I would say it is best in class. It is on the same level as Canon R3, as Sony A1. Now, I am covering here for the most part only the photo aspects of this camera. There is a video aspect of this camera that really has an extended use cases, and it is a powerhouse what you can do. I mean, this camera shoots an 8K and RAW. I mean, it is totally off the wall what camera does, and it is really it's a beast. There's a bunch of videos on my channel, guys. If you're interested, where I'm covering the video aspect of this camera, please go check it out. You can just scroll through my channel, you will find it. Now, for the most part, this is it. If you're wondering whether you should be using this camera for a wedding, are you gonna have any difficulty? I would say absolutely not. Now, do you need to learn the camera? Yes, just like settings. But once you're familiar with the camera, and for the most part, if you might be transitioning from like Z6, Z7, the menu in the back of the camera is very similar. There's a bunch of other functions here added to this camera, which makes this camera to be a beast. Now, but I would say that you will be very happy when it comes to the autofocus and image quality and deliverables and battery life and ergonomics. I mean, on and on and on and on. So guys, this is it. Please subscribe if you haven't already, so that I know that you like the content, and it allows me to make more content like this for viewers like you. Thank you.